Have you ever worried as a coordinator, how am I going to get my orientations to rock? Maybe you've been to rocking orientations before and you really want yours to be like that. Have you ever worried, how am I going to get myself to relax enough to perform well on stage? Do you ever wonder what you're going to do when your tech fails or something goes wrong and you have to kill a little bit of time on stage? I know I've worried about stuff like that. My name is Chad. I've been a coordinator for a couple of summers and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about stage presence. Now, some people think stage presence is innate. It's something you're born with or something you're born without. I don't believe that. Now, I've always been kind of an outgoing guy. I like to talk to people. I like to be on stage with a microphone. But you know what? Stage presence isn't something I've always been good at. It's something I've developed over time. So I want to talk to you today about 4 tips that helped me develop stage presence. And hopefully, it can help you develop stage presence a little bit better as well. Now, my 4 tips are as follows. Tip number 1. Think beforehand of the atmosphere you're trying to create. Tip number 2, people have to feel safe, so you have to feel safe and relaxed. Tip number 3, avoid cliches, and being over the top is a good thing, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And tip number 4, interacting with your audience means your audience has to have an opportunity to respond. So again, those are my 4 tips, and let's start off with the first one. Think beforehand, what atmosphere do you want to create? Or rather, what do you want your audience to feel? Now, when I think of a place with great atmosphere, the first place I think of is Disneyland. I'll be honest, I don't think Disneyland has that great of rides. In fact, I think their rides are geared towards little children. But I love Disneyland. How many of you feel that same way? Why? Why do we love Disneyland when Six Flags clearly has better rides? It's the atmosphere. When you walk in and you walk through Disneyland, there's a magical feeling, and people even call it the Disney magic. You feel it as soon as you step foot into downtown Disney. You hear music playing everywhere, all the cast and crew, they're giddy and happy, and it kind of makes you feel giddy and happy. Disneyland, as poor as the rides are, does an excellent job of creating this wonderful, terrific atmosphere. Now let's think a little bit about EFY's atmosphere. Let's just pick one event. Let's just pick orientation. How do you want people to feel when they walk into orientation? See, can you imagine someone walking into Disneyland and seeing the Mickey Mouse character talking to Goofy about paperwork? How would that make you feel as you walked into Disneyland? Would you think, oh no, their paperwork's not together? Would you be worried about how it's gonna feel? Mickey and Goofy and even the janitors and custodians at Disneyland, they're all giddy, too happy. Sometimes I laugh at them because they're so gaudy with their happiness and giddiness. When you walk into orientation, how are you going to create the atmosphere of excitement? You can't be filling out paperwork at a time like that. Your BCs need to run around and take care of paperwork. But coordinators, you've got to be on stage. You've got to have a microphone in your hand, and you've got to make it feel exciting for them. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at faking feeling excited. You have to get yourself to actually feel excited. Now, what makes you feel excited? For me, the music at orientation, it's enough. I hear the music, I'll just run across the stage, start doing the SpongeBob or whatever dance move I can think of, and I'll get excited just by the music and just by people walking in. How could you get yourself to feel more excited? You have to feel the way you want your audience to feel. Think about the mission. A lot of you have served missions before. If you want your investigator to feel the spirit, what's the best indicator of whether or not the spirit is in the room or not? If you want the youth and the counselors to feel excited, how are you going to get them to feel excited? You have to be excited. You have to feel excited. The more excited you feel, the more excited they're going to feel. And they can tell if you're faking it. They can tell if you're actually excited or if you're just pretending and putting on a show. So, tip number 1, think beforehand of the atmosphere you want to create. At orientation, it's an atmosphere of excitement. And once you think of how you want your audience to feel, get yourself to feel that way. Every time before I teach, I listen to church hymns. I pray and ask for the Spirit. Every time before orientation, I turn on the music really loud and dance. That's how I do it. And I highly recommend, if you want to have better stage presence, you have to feel the way you want your audience to feel. So that's tip 1. Tip 2, relax. How to get yourself to relax and why it's important.
My name is Phil Davison, and I am seeking our party's nomination for the position of Stark County Treasurer on November 10th. I have been a Republican in times good, and I have been a Republican in times bad.
Step 2 is relax and be confident. You've got to relax. Did you see Phil Davidson there? He was so crazy, it made everybody feel uncomfortable. Have you ever been at a lesson where the person is so uncomfortable on stage that it makes the entire audience feel uncomfortable? You can't do that. You've got to be able to relax and get yourself to just be yourself on stage. Be natural. Feel more natural. Now, when I was on my mission, there was a time when I was called to be a leader in the mission, and I was so scared to give talks at zone conferences that when I got up behind the microphone, I would freeze. Here's how I got myself to relax. A couple of things I did. Number 1, I sat down, turned on some soft music, and breathed. No joke. I would do that before lessons. I would sit there, close my eyes, listen to some soft music, and breathe for about 5 minutes. That's what helped me relax the first time. Other things that helped me relax is I would focus on one thing I could control during my teaching. Now, a lot of the times when we're nervous, it's because we're so worried about the tech. We're so worried about how the music's gonna sound. We're so worried what counselors and youth are gonna think about us. That's when we get nervous, is when we start worrying so much about those things outside of our actual control, and we start to feel out of control of the lesson. So worry about one thing, just one little thing you can control, one little thing you can improve on. For example, you may have noticed I talk fast. I'm a fast talker. I know that. Sometimes I think it's a problem, sometimes I don't. When I was on stage on my mission, one of the ways I helped myself relax was by thinking about talking slow. I did. The more I focused on talking slow, the less I worried about all that other stuff, because I was focusing on one thing I could control. Therefore, I felt in control of the situation. If you're focusing on the things you can't control, like the tech or how people are reacting to you, you'll feel out of control, which is a nervous feeling in and of itself. So, to help yourself relax, take a minute to breathe. Take a minute to think about one thing you can work on. And the third thing I think is actually the most crucial, and that's this. Do a run through of the entire event beforehand. Now, anyone that's been a co with me before can tell you, I'd like to show up at least a half an hour early to every orientation I did so I could do an entire run through of what we were gonna talk about. I was so adamant about this because every time I forgot to do the run through or I thought I didn't have time, something would fail in the tech every single time. And it would leave one of us on stage talking and the other one behind stage frantically on a laptop trying to get something to work. If you run through the entire orientation beforehand, then you're much, much less likely to have any tech problems. Also, that gives you confidence as you go into it. Hey, I've already done this once. I've already done this once on this stage. Now find other ways to help yourself relax. What makes you feel calm? What makes you feel confident? Think about it. Write down in your notes right now something that you could do to help yourself relax before you get on stage. And just so you know, it's okay to feel jittery. I've done orientation, 30 times as a coordinator. And you know what? I get a little bit nervous before every time I do it. But as long as I help myself relax, I figure out a way to give it in a good way. So that's what you want to do. Help yourself relax. And that's tip 2. Tip 3. Avoid cliches / over the top is good.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Rapier, and I'm grateful for the opportunity I have to share this comedy with you tonight. You know, I gotta admit that when the producer of the show first called me, you know, and asked me if I'd do this show, boy, was I nervous. But as I began to prepare these jokes, well, I realized I need this comedy more than any of you.
Why is that so funny? Because it's true. Everyone that gets up says the same exact cliches over and over and over again. Why? Because it's comfortable. It's something that everyone's done, so when you say it, you don't feel nervous saying it. It's what's been done before. I like to say that over the top is good. Be a little bit over the top. Don't be afraid to have a little bit of swagger when you're on stage. I was reading up on stage presence on other articles so I could give you some accurate information from other people. One of my favorite quotes from the 4 articles that I read says this: exaggerate. If you've ever watched yourself performing on video, you probably already know that the movements really have to be huge to even seem passable on stage. That's why one of the best tips anyone can give you is to exaggerate. Exaggerate every movement and then some. It's better to go over than under. Okay, so you really want to exaggerate. Be a little bit over the top if you have to. One of the things I always do is if I ask someone, does that make sense? Instead of just saying, does that make sense? I'll say, if that makes sense, say, oh yeah. And then everyone goes, oh yeah. And I'm like, no, I need some soul with that. Say, oh yeah, with a little bit of soul, go. Oh, right? It's so stupid. The first time I did that at an orientation, I sat there and thought, what did I just say? That was so weird. I can't believe I did that. That was so not normal. Too far over the top, too exaggerated, but you know what? The very next orientation, I did the exact same thing. Why? Because when you're on stage, exaggerating is what works. The more you put into something, the bigger you are on stage, the more your personality connects with your audience. So exaggerate. Be a little bit over the top. Be a little bit crazy. It's okay. If you don't feel a little bit embarrassed by a couple of the things that you've done on stage, then you're probably doing it wrong. Now, I don't mean be inappropriate, of course. Be appropriate, be within the limits, but don't be afraid to let your personality get a little bit bigger.
Tip 4. Get your audience involved in the process. Tip 4 is so important. It's give your audience an opportunity to respond. Don't just stand there and be in control of the situation. Let them do something. Let them be a part of it. Now, this is very crucial. So when you're standing up on stage, instead of saying something like, all right, guys, let's all see the counselors dance, say, hey, everybody stand up and dance. One of the things I do at every single orientation I've ever run is I say, okay, when that beat drops, I want everyone to get low, and when that beat drops, everyone jump. Now, sometimes we do these dances, and I'm sure a lot of you do it at orientation as well. I love doing it at orientation. I love it because the youth get so involved and so into it, and it looks so cool. Sometimes I'll say, stand up in the air and then wave your arms left, then right, then left, then right. If you do something like that during orientation, the audience has a chance to get involved and respond to what you're doing. So that's tip 4, is don't just stand up and feel like you're giving a presentation, but give them an opportunity to be a part of it. Let them respond to the things you're saying. Let them dance. Get them dancing. Get them standing. In fact, when I walk into orientation, I say rule number 1 is you can't sit, and rule number 2 is you have to dance. And it's awesome. Getting everyone standing will just change that atmosphere like we talked about earlier. We'll just make it more fun for everybody. Get the audience involved.
So those are my 4 tips. They're not the only tips. There are other tips to help with stage presence, but these will help you have better stage presence. Tip 1, consider the atmosphere beforehand. You have to feel the way you want your audience to feel if they're going to feel that way. Tip 2, relax. Help yourself relax. There are other things you can do as well, but make sure you do the full run through beforehand and then relax when you're on stage. Tip 3, avoid cliches, and over the top is good. Sometimes your actions have to be a little bit crazier than they would have had to have been otherwise if you're not on stage. And tip 4 is interacting with your audiences means they have to have a chance to respond. So make sure you interact with your audiences. I hope this has been helpful, guys. I hope you'll feel a little bit more comfortable on stage this summer. A lot of you have so much talent with this already. If you guys are struggling, look around the room. There's so many talented people. Ask them for their tips. Again, these aren't the only 4 tips that we have. And I'm gonna leave you with a little scrolling thing here that shows you different ideas of things I do when the tech's wrong or when there's dead time and you need something just to fill the time. Thanks, guys, and I look forward to seeing you.